I'm Seema Rao, Deputy Director and Chief Experience Officer of the Akron Art Museum, and I'm joined by,
Sequoia Bostick,
I have to tell you,
illustrator.
illustrator, yeah, Sequoia. I have to tell you, you win for name that I have the hardest time spelling. Every time I type your name, I even know like what a tree is. We even know we have met each other in real life, and yet Sequoia, all your vowels,
Yeah,
all the vowels.
that's my fun fact.
That's your fun fact. You have all the
Mhm.
vowels, except for Y. You're gonna need to have a Y in the middle name.
No.
There's life goals for
Definitely
you.
not.
Pick up a Y. Um, so you introduced yourself as an illustrator. Is that what you studied in school?
Yes, I earned my BFA in 2014 from the Cleveland Institute of Art. Yeah, in illustration.
So what made you go into that?
I really wanted to tell stories any way I could. Like, I just like hearing about like uh, everyone's story, and I find that I can do that best through illustration.
So your cards are actually, I find it interesting. They're very narrative. They feel like a story. Each of them feels like a story. Did you have a story in mind when you came up with the compositions?
No, other than just like a kind of slice of life, like day in the life of, like this is things that I do like every once a week, I guess, with that being said. Like I have a lot of plants and I like to take care of them, and so this is just my kind of displaying my routine, like using different characters.
Mm-hmm. Uh, so they're a little bit autobiographical.
Hmm.
I feel like I can see you in them. Um, I also am, the color families you use, you have a very, when I look at your works, I always think, oh, that must be her. Like I see that, like I sort of see the same sort of tones very similarly, or the figures have a clear style to it. Um, do, how did you come upon sort of the look that is your work?
Um, like a lot of it is like derivative. Like I really like color and shape language, so a lot of the things that I pick is like trying to set a mood or set like it's creating a setting using the
Hmm.
characters and using the
Hmm.
colors.
Hmm. I love
um
that word mood. That's right.
hmm yeah, so like yeah, I try to pick colors that kind of work well together but also kind of says, hey, this is a certain time of day, this is like calming, or this could be like super energetic depending on how you feel about those colors.
Hmm.
um yeah, and so it kind of
So
all
they're
comes
all part of the
together.
storytelling.
Hmm.
Uh-huh, uh-huh. Do you have a word that you were hoping to evoke with each of your images, or like a feeling?
um yeah, like depending on which one you're looking at, like one is breathe, the one is like relax, those kinds of things. Like I have some of the cards next to me now and I'm
Mm-hmm.
looking at them and I'm like, yeah, this one's just like, patience,
Mm-hmm.
uh, breather and stuff like that. So,
Did the words come first, or the image, or the idea, or how does the
um,
composition come to be?
so it always starts with like definitely with a word. Like I always go, oh, well, how do I create this feeling? And then usually it follows with the colors. And then it follows with just the imagery that goes inside of it. Like, of course, there's like a ton of different kinds of plants, so you can kind of get whatever like feel that you want based on that.
Does it take a long time to create one image?
Uh, some of them take longer than others. A lot of the times it's like maybe a whole day worth of just like sketching and doodling and then, cleaning up that artwork. And then finished product usually in the middle of the night.
I feel like that's a lot of illustrators tell me that because it's a
Oh yeah.
commercial art on some level, right? So you got to finish. Your time is, you have other things you do, and this is often a middle of the night thing for a lot of illustrators.
Hmm.
You said something about sketching and doodling. So tell us about other parts of your practice. So that's sort of how you got to these postcards, but in general, how does your practice work?
Though I don't consider myself a writer, I like to write things down. So a lot of my sketchbooks will be filled with like pages of writing, and then next to it will be like drawings and stuff like that. So, like you said, I start off with a word, and then that word kind of blossoms into like a story, and then that story blossoms into colors. Because I have like a specific website that I go to pick out colors, and I'm like, okay, this color palette is what I'm using. And then from there, think about what in that image do I want to show, like what's going to be the main focus of that piece of artwork and stuff like that. And then it moves on to like sketching it out, kind of more of a scribbled finish, I call it. And that's something that I can scan in and clean up on my computer, and then either I keep it digital or I go back to like a traditional, setting where I use paints or like colored pencils or something to finish it.
That's interesting. So it's analog and digital. Like you're going back and forth between those. So why use both? I mean, you can
like sometimes for me, like I can visualize something better when it's cleaner, and not to say that my process isn't clean, but sometimes it's quicker to do it on the computer than it is to like constantly, redraw the image over and over again. So like, yeah, I can like throw it on the computer and slap some colors over it. And if I don't like those colors, slap some other colors and kind of like pick out that process through that.
It feels like the thing they say in business about iteration, like fail fast. They talked about that like in Harvard Business Review, like fail fast, do it really fast, understand what you're doing, keep trying another thing, keep trying another thing. It seems like your process in some ways is, I don't mean quick, but it seems like you have a lot of like, oh, I'm going to try this. This isn't right. I'm going to try this. I'm going to try this. Is that true? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, and like, especially when it stays digital, it's like, okay, I want to crank this out. And then I want to be able to like, show it or apply it to something. So yeah, it's good to move faster.
It sounds a bit like because illustration, again, we talked about it as a commercial art, right? Like illustrators make a living by making many illustrations sometimes, some illustrators. But let's go back to the doodling. How much of your sketches go on the floor or done or not for a final product, just for thinking?
I would say like when I was like young, it would be like literally every single thing that I would doodle would become a thing, even if it wasn't like, amazing. But I like filling the pages with work. So that was my main purpose. Now it is more like a thought process. So I would say like maybe like 60% of the sketches that I do usually stay in the book and never come out. And then the other, so the other 40% kind of, becomes things.
Nice. Is it because you've kind of settled on a group of things you're working on, or is it because you've expanded all the things you sketch?
It usually depends on what I'm working on at the time. So like a lot of the things that I keep to myself is just like, oh, here's an idea, write it down and then I'm done. And it could be something that I could apply to a future project, later down the line. But yeah, a lot of it is just driven by like what I'm working on at the time.
So you have a visually rich space you're in. Where do you see where do you get ideas and visual kind of cues?
So yeah, like I like to keep my space like super colorful. And I have a lot of artist friends, that like I like to share, like keep their work up around me because sometimes I'm inspired by my friends. I get a lot of inspiration from reading children's books. I mean, I know they're for kids, but the artwork's beautiful, and I have a lot of like inspirations from those artists that create books for kids, and also reading comic books because story narrative driven like content.
You mentioned your friends. I know that you do a lot of work. You are part of an artist community. So how does community help you in the creation of your art?
It just keeps me going. Seeing like everyone else like creating work inspires me to also create work, and also seeing people kind of succeed in what they're doing is also a really good motivator as well. Yeah, it's really nice. And like, I just love what everyone creates in general. Everyone's style is so unique and different. Like, it's hard not to be inspired by it.
I've noticed that you're sort of a booster for other people, which I really appreciate when people lift other people up too. So these postcards, how were they, did you print these yourself?
I actually went through a printing company. They're kind of like a small business, so
Oh,
that's the
cool.
other thing. Like
Oh, that's awesome.
supporting small businesses. It's a print shop in Philadelphia called
Oh,
Fireball
cool.
Printing.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Cool. The colors are really nice. They look good. They're printed well. But you also do other kinds of printing, right?
hmm
Tell us about your obsession with rissographs.
So yeah, I really like the colors of Rizzograph printing are like amazing. And I
So
also
what
like
is,
kind
I think
of,
most people won't know what risograph printing is. What is it?
I mean, I don't know if I'm like the
It's
best
like a
person
print,
to explain
it's like a
things.
color copier, but fancy.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like they have all these fancy toners that
Yeah.
you use to like kind of photocopy things, and it's kind of color limited, so you can't like go too crazy with it, but the kind of like prints that they create are like super cool and super
Hmm.
amazing.
They're kind of
Um,
lo-fi, hi-fi, I feel like.
quite, and the machines are like some of the ones I've seen are massive, like
Yeah.
giant, like tall printers.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. It feels like it's from an 80s movie to me.
hmm oh yeah, that's a good description. But it's
So what
really
are some of the
cool.
things that you do on rissographs? What are some of the like kinds of aesthetics that
Um,
you pull out of it?
like a lot of cool like comic book artists love to use it to kind of like boost up their black and white printing. Like I was recently involved in a anthology called Paranew, and I'm just
Mhm.
going to show it because
Oh,
yeah,
it's
this is
so
their Rizzograph
cool.
printed pieces. So it's like, you know, a lot of comic book artists use it for their work, and it's a super simple way to like, you know, make your comic look interesting. Like the colors are always really nice, and you can even get colors that, you know, normally don't exist on like a CMYK printer or anything like that. So you
Mm.
can get some really unique colors.
There is an authenticity to it. The
hmm
ones that I've seen on your Instagram that you post, there's something that feels like it's from a pre-digital kind of hand-touched sort of quality to it. That
hmm
I mean, these postcards are beautiful and they look beautifully produced, but they don't look like I like pulled them each separately, right?
Indeed. Yeah,
Yeah.
I kind of like the idea of just like the each book is like kind of unique in its own way because the printing's not always perfect. It's kind of offset sometimes depending on like, you know, what machines you use. So it kind of gives it like a unique quality that you won't get from like a regular printer.
Yeah,
Um,
it's a balance because illustration is the opposite of unique, right? A lot of illustration is stuff that you produce that can be mass produced.
hmm
And I like that you work in this as well.
hmm
Another thing that I've noticed in your some of the things that you do, I like you have a called. You mentioned comic books, and you're very
hmm
involved in the book world. What do comic books? Why comic books?
Um, like I said earlier, it's like a very like super easy way to tell stories. And there's a lot of different varieties of comic books, so it's not always like, you know, superheroes. It's not always, you know, yeah, Marvel and DC related things. It could be literally anything you want, and it can also be like mostly written, and then mostly pictures, because there's some artists that like to tell stories with just using the pictures, and so each panel was just like a silent image that kind of progresses a story. And then there's like the zine world where they do mostly writing, but it is still considered like a comic or a zine. But also like you can even do just like slice of life autobio stuff, which I find like super fun. Like that's the kind of comics that I like to create. It's just like telling stories.
Uh-huh, uh-huh. So what are some of the stories you want to tell?
Um, a lot of the stories that I tell like are like childhood, definitely within the slice of life realm. Like it's not always like just about me. It's just about the things that I experienced. So what's going on around me. I like to describe it as like I'm a background character in my own uh, biopic because it's just like I'm just in there. I'm just there, but it happened, and here it is, and
You're an
maybe
observer.
yeah, I'm there in the background, and there I am. So.
It it's also that you're an observer, you're a sharer. you're a communicator, but you're keep saying, you know, communicate. You're also communicating through relevance, right? Like you're saying that this is my life to help tell this story rather than the superheroes. When I hear comic, I often think like, I don't want to shout out to any particular company or brand, but you know, somebody who has something that isn't realistic. I think there's a different kind of relevancy probably in comic books.
Oh, yeah.
And the ones that you do, and I think it's interesting because when I've seen them, I am like, is that Sequoia? You know, because you look like, I mean, it looks like the people look like you. The character who is you looks like you. So there you go. But what do you hope the viewer gains out of looking at the comic books or these postcards?
Just like a common understanding for the most part. Like, I want people to look at it and be like, oh, like, that is something that I do too, or like, oh, that's a moment, and like, I've had something similar like that happen to me. And it's just, you know, just being like normalizing normal, I guess. Yeah, yeah.
It's really a good thing in the world, normalizing normal. I feel like
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I think that's something that's a little bit hard for us, where people are always exemplary. You know, we always use exemplary words, and stories often, sometimes I'll say to my husband, I'll read a book, and then I'll tell him the story, and I say, do you think that happens in your life? And he's like, no, I don't think that happens. No, that doesn't happen. But I think a lot of media pushes us towards those outliers. And I like the idea that you're showing and elevating the normal. I think in common. What are some of the struggles that you have in your work? Like what are places that it feels hard sometimes?
I would say definitely like when it's, I guess, too relevant, like, you know, like with current issues and stuff like that, finding like, you know, that perfect way to talk about the issue without, you know, causing any extra confusion or problems with it.
Have you had any cases recently like that?
Not recently, no. I've been able to like tell the stories kind of, you know, to the best of my ability is what I say. So like,
what's one example that you've succeeded in telling a difficult story?
I'm trying to think of it. It's hard to think of it off the top of my head.
I know. It's also an interest. It's okay.
Yeah. Like I know like and when I was working on my children's book for my senior year, that's going a little bit back, but like it's an example.
You're actually very young, so it's okay.
Yeah. But like I went on the topic of like latchkey kids and like single parents and stuff like that. So like telling the story about this character who does get left at home alone by themselves a lot, like that it's like something that's, you know, okay, but can be dangerous depending on the situation. But also showing that it's kind of like okay that that's a thing. I wish I could have explored it more, of course, but like it was just like a children's book, so we had to get through. Yeah.
How did you? That's like so that I mean that could go in a dark way, and I think your work actually always sort of stays in a. I don't think light is the word, but in a positive way, maybe. So how do you maintain that? How do you maintain sort of telling a story without bogging down the story with some of that stuff, some of the hard stuff? Or I don't know if that's exactly what I mean, because I think you do deal with hard stuff. You deal with it in a gentle way. So how do you stay in that gentle way? Is probably a better way to say.
Like I guess I kind of look at it like if I was talking to my younger self, or you know, kind of try to explain it to a sibling, like, because I have like, there's 6 of us. And so I think about how I would talk to my younger brothers and sisters about it or anything like that. And kind of like, you know, telling them, hey, like this is a thing that happens and it's okay to be afraid of it, but like, don't let it like, you know, control you, I guess. Yeah.
You know, I think that also goes back to being an illustrator, right? Illustrators tell these things in a gentle way. You mentioned children's books and how important they are to you. Children's books don't shy away from tough things. They just tell them in a way that isn't rough. You know, they're, you know, sort of tell you in a gentle way. Do you ever feel sometimes that the arts have sort of a hierarchy where applied arts like illustration might not be hierarchically as get as much acclaim as say like gallery painting, academic painting. Do you feel that sort of tension in the field?
I think when I first started, yes, but like it's definitely the scale is starting to kind of tip
Mm,
more towards applied arts. Like a lot like comics, small press especially, indie comics are becoming like more relevant to what's happening now, and like it's easier to understand, and everyone's kind of leaning into that kind of style over like the more classical sense.
they
Like
caught up with you.
hmm so like yeah, I think yeah, it's definitely tipping more towards like artists like me, who yes are applied artists and also have like a specific style that isn't like cookie cutter kind of work. And so you're able to like see that more in like what I guess in like cities like even now like the murals that have been going up around Ohio. Um, yeah, they're all like artists that are like me. They're applied artists, they're comic artists, they're illustrators who you would think normally wouldn't do stuff like this, but are doing stuff like this now because it's, you know, becoming popular.
Why do you think it is?
Um, I don't want to say it's like a trend or anything, but like I don't know. I think the styles, everyone's like the styles are more, I guess, are more leaning towards like the general public. Like
Mm-hmm.
I guess rather the general public is becoming more relevant.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think the art. I think your work is really accessible. Like I look at it and it's visually appealing to a lot of people, is what I might say about your work. To go back to the colors, like I think that you blend it in a way that feels harmonious, whereas some artists might do something that is meant to be thoughtful by being not very harmonious,
Hmm.
being hard to connect to. You said style before, and I did want you to talk a little bit about your style. You have a very, particularly your figures. I could see, I could, if I walked into a small, like small press show, I'm pretty sure I could immediately point out which ones are yours by your style. How did you come to your style?
This goes back to the children's books. Like a lot
Mhm.
of the artists that I like enjoy, like their characters are kind of playful and kind of like, you know, approachable and stuff like that. Like Bill Joyce is like a big
Yeah.
um, inspiration for me. Like his characters are all very, like, yeah, they're very nice looking and approachable, and his colors are really good as well. Like, I don't know if you know, like Roly Polioli and like Rise of the Guardians. These are all like things that were books that got turned into TV shows and movies, and like, but you can see with even within his style, like the characters are just like meant to mentor or tell a story in a way. Um, so I try to pull that into my work a lot, especially because I do work with like kids and teenagers and stuff like that for art projects and all of that. So creating like characters that are relatable, but also like uh, welcoming.
Hmm. Hmm. You know, I've obviously met you in real life, or I've just said this on this interview. You're always, some people, I don't know that I'm always happy, but I'm often smiling. And there's
Hmm.
not that many people in the world who are often smiling. Like if you see them, even when I'm smiling, I'm not even happy necessarily, sort of my resting face.
Yeah.
I do think you're probably very happy, but you're often smiling in real life.
Hmm.
And I think it's interesting because your characters are often, even if they're not literally smiling, they look like they're about to smile. Is that
Hmm.
a conscious choice, or is that just in you because you're a smiler?
Um, I think it's like I don't think it's not a conscious choice for sure. Like I think I just draw what feels, you know, right. And even if they're just kind of like in the moment, that to me is also just like being happy if you're in the moment. So like a lot
Yeah,
of yeah. So a lot of the characters, yeah, they're just kind of just enjoying themselves.
sure are. They're always like,
Hmm. Like, oh, this is
um,
pleasant. This is
that's right.
calming. Like,
It
yeah.
is. It is calming. Actually, looking at your work does feel calming. The one with the plants, for example, I was looking at it. I was like, oh,
Hmm.
which is, I mean, that's huge, right? To make people happy is a huge thing. You said something else that I wanted to go back to just now about being an educator, and you talked about having, younger siblings. it seems like educating and mentoring people is an important part of your work and your practice. Is it, you want to talk a little bit about the role of, communicating with others? Because it sounds like you teach and you talk to people. How does that play into your work?
Let's see. I have to think. um, like I always oh well, I hate talking about myself. Okay.
That's what, that's a theme all of these interviews have.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. All the artists are like, ooh, but I'm going to do this because it's important for the exhibition. But so that's okay.
Yeah. So I guess like with my work, I don't know if it so much connects to my work as much as it just connects to me, like realizing like, when I was a kid, there wasn't a lot of like, opportunities around. And like you always heard that, oh, artists, don't get paid a lot of money, or artists are always starving, like that kind of thing. And so I wanted to kind of prove them wrong in a sense. So like, yes, I like keep creating work, but then like with the teaching and the mentoring, it's like I'm saying, hey, like you can do it if you really want to. Like, so if you want to be an artist, like here's how I did it, but like that's not always like what you're gonna need. So like explore your avenues and stuff like that. And that's like with the same in my art, where it always kind of changes in the themes. I mean, yes, there's always like a general style to it, but it's always like, hey, like, try new things, apply yourself to like whatever you're interested in, like to see where it goes. And so I guess that's like a nice connection that I make with them. And also just like, saying, hey, like, actually, no, I think I'm done. Yeah.
You being just by you're sort of saying, just by working as an artist, I'm a mentor to people because I'm making a living. It is hard. I see you're like a machine. You're making so much, you're doing so many things. Is it hard to make a living as an artist?
I guess if you like, my problem is that I want to do everything.
Oh,
so good. Like I have trouble settling with just doing one thing, which also kind of helps me, I guess, keep like, being successful and keeping myself afloat and all of that. But I say, yeah, if you're determined enough, you can definitely kind of, be an artist, be a working artist and still be kind of successful.
It's drive. You have
yeah.
I mean, since I've met you, you have a lot of drive. And I do think when I look at people who've made a living as a working artist, it's an inherent drive to make. Like I can't imagine you not making things. We commissioned you to do one, and I got the email from the curator of the exhibition, Reggie, and she was like, she's gonna make a lot. She wants to make 100. And I was like, whoa. And I said, oh yeah, that sounds, and I emailed her back. I said, that sounds like Sequoia. But make her know that we don't need to do that. She doesn't need to do that. And then she said that you said, but I really want to. And I think that was something that really illustrated to me, and then you ended up with 4. But that illustrated to me so much about you, that it wasn't just, I think for some people, the job that you do is that you have to do it to get the money. For you, you wanted to put these images out there. I mean, I think that's why you produced 4. Is that why you produced 4?
Yeah, I mean, I wish I could have done more. And it's funny because after I sent those off, I ended up creating like 2 more designs that I'm like, well, once those go out, maybe I'll put these out as well. Yeah, so yeah, I think this one's like one of the ones that did make it into the thing.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and
that
I was like,
pretty.
oh,
is it sunset?
yeah, sunset. Yeah. So I was like, oh, well, that's sad, but I guess I can still use them for something else. But
that brings up that one, and then there's the one that we have of the plants. I love, in terms of something we didn't talk about at the beginning, but now I'd love to go back to it, is you telling stories, but you also do a really good job of composing the story. Like it looks like she's interacting with that plant. How do you choose the vignette that you put in the in any frame of a comic book or in a postcard or in any part of a story you're telling?
I think it's like the image that's going to best represent like that story or to progress that story along. So like, yeah, like when I'm writing something down, it's going to be like the important part is that she is caring for these plants, or these plants are very important to her. So when I draw the image, I'm like, what, like if it was me, like what would I be focusing on if I was, you know, taking care of this plant? And for me, I always, in the morning, I'll grab the leaves to make sure they're like, you know, not crisping or anything like that, or to just check the overall health of them. So yeah, that's like something where it's just like, oh, she really cares about this. So this is that image just that's going to best represent it.
It could be like, I could see somebody taking one of your postcards and writing a short story because they feel like they're a moment in something. Like, you know, you feel like you could kind of guess what's happening next or what happened just before that scene. And it also makes me think, you know, you mentioned plants a couple times and sort of caring for things. What are other non-art practices in your life that support your art practices?
Definitely like reading. I like reading and watching documentaries. So like a lot of the and it doesn't really matter if it's like super sciencey or super like, it could be like just a documentary. I like listening to people talk about things. So like, yeah, it's usually a nice inspiration for me. And
you're a voracious observer. It sounds like you are just, so much information is coming in and then you're distilling it into something. Are there things right now that are exciting, documentaries that are exciting to you, or places that you're seeing, some stories that you're looking at?
Like I've been recently watching Minefield. It's like a science kind of documentary by Michael. I don't know, it's a guy who runs this YouTube channel called Vsauce. But yeah, he pretty much just talks about the human condition and just like psychologically and like yeah, how things kind of work inside your mind. So he talks about consciousness and like being like why what's the one that I really liked? There was like the isolation one where he isolated himself for like 3 days. It was super cool, like, and just seeing how not being like, we're social creatures, so not being around people, how it affects us and stuff like that. So yeah, that kind of stuff is really interesting to me.
We're living in that social experiment right now.
Exactly.
Has your work changed in COVID?
I would say, yeah, like I think a lot of my images have become more single people images instead of like multiple people images. That's something that I noticed. I was just like, oh, I'm used to putting like a lot of, you know, people into all of my work. And now it's just like, here's one person kind of in the moment, which is good and bad, I guess, depending on, yeah.
Somebody, yes, I see that there's both strength in being able to learn how to be in isolation, and then there's a difference in not having to be in isolation.
Yeah, because I remember at the beginning when everything first shut down, I was kind of excited. I don't know. I was like, well, it does suck that I don't like, I'm not out working somewhere right now, but at the same time, like, here's my plants, here's my books, here's my all of my things, and I can be around all of my things.
Yes, yeah. You seem very social though.
Oh yeah, and that's where like after a while I was like, oh, right. I should talk to somebody. I should. Yeah. And like, yeah, so like, but like for a while it was just me and my roommate. And then when my roommate went back to work, it was just me in the studio. And I was just like, oh, okay. Yeah, this is not great, but you know, you do what you have to. So.
When you work in the studio, what is it like? If I was a fly on the wall, there's a music playing? Do you have lots of pens out? Is it quiet?
Usually it is like me and my friend who also like they operate on the other side of the studio. Like usually we do keep our headphones in just because sometimes what we listen to is like ridiculous and it's distracting to the other person. But sometimes it's like there is music playing out loud. And, you know, there's like, if they're working on like their digital stuff, they have their tablet up. If I'm working on a painting, my desk is like, you know, explosive of mess happening around me. But yeah, it's fun because occasionally we'll just turn around and just start talking and then, get distracted from whatever we're supposed to be doing.
It just sounds, so much of your life sounds so communal, so shared, which makes sense if you're trying to communicate. If your work is about communicating, you're making it from a position of communication, and then you're with people you're communicating with. Your whole life seems so integrated. That's wonderful. So, is there anything that would surprise somebody when they looked at these postcards that they wouldn't have guessed that went into the making of them?
I would say that probably the surprising thing would be that I probably have all of these plants in my house. So they're from actual references. Yeah.
You know all these plants yourself.
Yes,
You've touched all their leaves.
Yes, I have touched all of their leaves. I have propagated all of them at least once or twice. So
you mentioned twice about caretaking for plants. Do you think of your art as a form of caretaking for people?
I've never actually thought about it that way, but yeah, I would say that's pretty good. Like representing the common person in the moment.
I hadn't thought of it that way, but now hearing you mention the plants and the care that you take for the plants, I wish that you lived at my house with my plants. My plants wish you lived here with my house with my plants. They don't get caretaken as well, but I think that's such a theme. And now looking back at your postcard, thinking back to your postcard, I can see that they feel like you are caring for your viewer, that you're really looking out for your viewer. And, those words that you started with. About patience, and what were some of the other words that underlie our perspective?
Breathe, meditate. Yeah.
And that's been important for COVID, to be brave and to be able to find a way to meditate in isolation. Yeah, I think that's wonderful. So what's exciting to you next?
I actually have an art show coming up at the Malone Art Gallery. So that's happening October 9th. Yeah, so it'll feature maybe there'll be prints of those postcards there, but also they'll be really highlighting my element series, which is the 4 elements, water, air, earth, and fire, and they're kind of like goddesses. So those are really unique because I custom built the frames, and so it's just a whole experience, and I'm excited to show them.
And the frames are complicated.
Oh yeah, so there's
right?
a triangle.
Shaped frames, right?
Yeah, so yeah, the frames are the shape of the illustration themselves, which didn't realize I would be using so much math, but I guess it makes sense.
The round one looks really good. I was like, wow, I saw it on Instagram and I thought, that's hard. That one looks, they all look great. The round one seemed particularly hard to make.
Oh, yeah. It was surprisingly the easiest one to make.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, you tricked me. That's wonderful. When does the show end?
I think it ends December.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, sometime in December.
A little time to see the show. That's exciting. And then do you have some other other things you're playing around with the Rizzograph or anything else next, technique-wise, style-wise?
So I'm hoping to start playing around with just seasonal, I guess, themes. So because we're going to be either stuck inside not enjoying them or enjoying them a lot because there's nothing to do inside of anywhere. So kind of creating more narrative pieces just within the seasons.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. And that's a very, again, your positive outlook. It's a very positive outlook rather than rather than suffering through these next couple seasons that we're about to hit, enjoying them and using them for artistic inspiration. That's a yeah.
And then lastly, I help out with a comic book show here in Cleveland called Genghis Khan. Normally it would be happening at the end of November, but because of COVID, we're shut down. But we are planning on putting out a comic anthology for Genghis Khan to help raise money for next year.
Cool. So you're gonna make one of them? You're gonna do part of it?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna participate. Like how I run like my anthology. Sometimes I put comics in it, sometimes I don't, because I want to leave it open to other people to submit to it. But yeah, I think I'm gonna put one in this one.
Cool. That's another community. I know that's the one that I know. That's the one I know you do a lot of. That it's part of the community. I think it's the lifting up of other people and supporting their creativity, which I really appreciate. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you for talking to us.
All right, thank you.